What a beautiful background.
This is the Iranian carpet.
Ah,
So I
well,
decided to change it to a carpet.
okay, great. Well, I'm eager to hear about it. So let's get started. My name is Mel Lehman. I'm the director of Common Humanity, and I'm here in my studio. The studio represents what we're trying to do at Common Humanity, which is to build friendship, respect, and understanding between people in the Middle East and people here in America. And we're doing that visually at the moment in my studio. Uh, to my left, we have an Amish quilt, which represents my American background, my Amish Mennonite American background. And there on my other side, you see my work from the Middle East. We have painters that we exhibit and sell their work. And in future editions of the Peace Channel, we're going to be interviewing some of those artists. But at the moment, we have a distinguished visitor from Iran. We decided that in this point, at this time of pain and pandemic and crisis, instead of talking about politics, I'm a great follower of politics, but this time we want to talk about healing and wholeness. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, this afternoon, and we're talking about a concept called Nowruz, and I'm eager to hear more about that. You might want to get a pencil at the end of our program. We're going to have our website if you want to contact us. You might have a question ready, but enough for me. Let's get to our distinguished guest. Our guest this afternoon is Mr. Nabi Sonboli. He is an international affairs expert and scholar representing the Institute for Political and International Studies in New York. The Institute was founded in 1983 in Tehran as one of the first think tanks in Iran. Mr. Sonboli writes on Iran foreign policy, Iran-US relations, and Middle East developments. His writings have been published by irandiplomacy.ir, iranreview.org, the Iranian Journal of International Affairs, and several other distinguished journals. We have a true intellectual and a man of culture with us. Mr. Sonboli, please tell us a bit about Nowruz and how that is part of Iranian culture, which not many of us know much about.
Hello, Mr. Lehman. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity. And also, I would like to thank Common Humanity for arranging this event. Actually, the Nowruz in general shows the spirit of Nowruz demonstrates the common humanity, the commonalities in the American humanity. That's what I'm going to talk about today. Let me share my presentation. Yeah.
Ah, beautiful. There you go. Excellent.
Yes, I'm going to talk about first at the introduction about the diversities in Iranian culture and in general, because as human beings we see the diversities. The importance of peace and war, that it's completely related to our topic and our situation right now. And also the turning points in the history that we chose to begin with. I think the problems between Iran and the United States goes back to that turning point, that we are beginning all narratives here in the US and back in Tehran. When we study Quran asks human being, oh mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes. This verse clearly mentions that diversity is natural and God-given. This is not something that we have decided by ourselves. When we study the UNESCO Constitution, we see that it says war and peace are constructed and man-made. according to the into the preamble of the Constitution, since wars begins in the mind of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. It's clear that both war and peace are constructed and man-made. They are natural, they are not natural. The problem between Iran and the United States goes back to when we always begin the narratives about each other. When you listen to Iranians, they begin with 1953 military coup, and when you talk with Americans, they begin with the hostage crisis. And still, this narrative continues these days. But I think that Iran-US relations is much older. It maybe is in one term is even as old as Iran history. I want to invite you to just in 2 minutes listen to what Mr. McGregor, former director of British Museum, says about Cyrus Cylinder.
This is probably the first moment in history that we know of a ruler thinking about how he's going to manage a multicultural state. The object behind me is known as the Cyrus Cylinder, and it's made of baked clay, and it was buried at the foundation of a building in Babylon about 2,600 years ago, in fact in 539 BC. And what it is a declaration by the king of Persia, Cyrus, who has just conquered Babylon. And he's telling us what he's going to do. Babylon in 539 is ruled by Belshazzar. And Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar, the kings of Babylon, are the kings who had sacked Jerusalem, brought the Jews to Babylon, imprisoned them, brought all kinds of other people to Babylon and imprisoned them. And Cyrus, king of Persia, is going to set the people free. What he's going to do is allow people to go home and resume their religious life. Different religions, different people in different places. The Persian Empire is the first empire to have to run in different languages and to accommodate different faiths. So it's always been a point of reference. Cyrus has always been a point of reference to people wondering how you rule a society with different religions, different traditions without people fighting. So it's very important to us today because all our big cities have people of different religions, different languages. But he's particularly important in the United States because in the 18th century, when the founding fathers are thinking, how will we make a country where different faiths are all respected, but there's no state religion, they look to Cyrus. And Thomas Jefferson studies Cyrus. He tells his grandson to study Cyrus.
So the key point in here is that what is common between Iran and the United States is how to deal with diversity, how to manage a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. And this is the ideal, what's in the Cyrus Cylinder is the ideal that both Iranians and Americans have followed in managing their society. That's why I believe that we have a common ideal in history that we have learned from. When I study Iranian history, I find that still we have a multicultural, multi-ethnic society. But what has kept this multicultural and multi-ethnic society together for a long time, for more than 2,600 years, is it's not my term, it's what, as I will mention at the end, the current Secretary General of the UN called the spirit of Nowruz. Nowruz is a software that integrates a vast empire with different regions, with different cultures and ethnicities together to live together in peace. And also through Silk Road, it expands to other countries and regions in the world. This is the countries, the stars are the countries that celebrate Nowruz at present. And this is the Silk Road that has now expanded the influence of Nowruz from eastern part of China to to eastern part, from western part of China to eastern part of Europe. We have, as a ceremony in Nowruz, we have a table that is famous as a half-seen table. I try to understand what does it mean, what is behind this table that all families every year put on their prepare at their home and sit around it during the New Year ceremonies. There are some elements in this table that have symbolic meaning. It's Serke, it's symbol of patience. It's Sanjed, symbol of wisdom. Sabze or sprouted wheat is symbol of rebirth, renewal, and happiness. Seed, symbol of health, beauty, and love. And Sumak, symbol of rationality. And the last one is 7th one, I made a mistake, symbol of contentment, garlic. This is in brief the spirit of Nowruz: contentment, rationality, patience, wisdom, growth, power, and love. These are the elements that have shaped Iranian identity to be able to, different ethnicities, different groups to be able to live together, to understand each other, and to work with other for centuries. And that's what we need even today, both because it has helped us to, it has turned diversity into unity, both in times of prosperity and in times of pandemics, pressures, and problems. That's why I decided to talk about this and how it has turned the Iranian culture into unity, diversity into unity. When we studied the Iran geography and natural situation, we see that naturally Iran is very diversified. Iran is as big as, if you put Iranian map on Europe, Iran is almost as big as Italy, France, Germany, and part of the UK. So it's not a small country. From the weather point of view, from north to south, it's far different. Sometimes in the north, you can go for skiing, and in the south, in the Persian Gulf, you can go for swimming and other water games and in place. In terms of nature, as I mentioned, it is diversified from north, that it's green near the Caspian Sea, to the mountains at the mostly western and the northern part of the country, to the central part of the country that it's desert, and the weather is very hot. We have also still religiously, the country is diversified. It's not as diversified maybe as the past, but still the country is diversified. We have Muslims, both Shia and Sunni. Sunnis have 20 MP in the parliament. We have about 110,000 Christians, Armenians, and Asuris. They have 2 MPs in the parliament. We have Jews, about 20,000, that they have 1 MP, and Zoroastrians with 1 MP in the parliament. And ethnically, the country is diversified. Fars, Azeri, Kurd, Turkmen, Arab, Baloch, all have lived together for centuries. Still, the Zoroastrians have their own culture and their ceremonies in Iranian cities. We have the Vank Church in Isfahan that they still have ceremonies, New Year ceremony. We have the synagogue in Shiraz and also in Tehran. We have also the prophet Daniel tomb in Shush, a Jewish prophet that still is respected by both Muslims and Jews in the country. And it was last year that IRGC commemorated and respected the Jewish soldiers that lost their lives in defending their country. The point is here is that all people from minority to majority, they are Iranian, they regard themselves as Iranian, and they sacrificed their life to defend Iran, and they were killed in the war against Iraq. When we go back to religious leaders in in Shia, also the religious leader in Shia, they are also respected by everybody. We have, of course, it's not in Iran, but it's respected by Shias, all Iranians, Shias. Imam Hossein Shirani in Iraq, and the Arabian ceremony that millions of people participate. In that ceremony, even Christians participate to respect him. So this is not, what I mean is that all religious groups have tried to understand each other, to live with each other peacefully. When we come to diversity, to the art, we see again that Iranians have been able to manage diversity, to both respect Iranian, Islamic, and Western culture. It was 4 years ago that I visited an international fair in Tehran. It was tableau carpet, and these pictures I took by myself. And it was interesting for me that the artists are promoting 3 different cultures at the same time. We have Western tableaus that are woven to carpet. We have Iranian ones, and we have also Islamic ones against Western, Iranian styles, Western, again Western, Iranian, and also all together Islamic, Iranian, and also Western cultures. It needs an open mind to promote and accept 3 different cultures and try to respect them in art, and it's not just a business. When we look at the Iranian carpets, still we see how the Iranians have been able to turn diversity to a beautiful unity. And it's also different from northern part of the country to the south. When we come, the color change, the styles change, and this is how diversity and unity comes together. It shows that diversity is not something that we should be afraid of. Diversity makes the world more beautiful. When we come out, the colors change. The first ones are mostly woven in the northern part of the country, in Tabriz. When it comes to the central part, more Qom and Isfahan, and then it goes to Shiraz and the southern part. The color and the background, the kind of colors change in different parts of the country. Even in the architecture, I found the diversity and unity in architecture. When we look at the old architectures in Iranian buildings, we see that the center as a one point is symbol of unity, and the surrounding is symbol of diversity. Some people believe that it's symbol of the God at the center, and the surrounding is symbol of humanity. So it has a philosophy behind this kind of architecture that we see in Iranian cities and in all places. When we discussed about another important point that maybe it's interesting to mention is that when we look at the Iranian old buildings, they have tried to integrate and incorporate, bring together environment in the building. It is how they respect environment and water, because the people have lived in a place that have faced with shortage of green areas and also water. So they have tried to bring them into their homes, into their buildings, and respect them. We also have the same situation in the old houses. How they have integrated environment into the building to keep the environment and to save the environment all around the world, all around the year. We also again see diversity in clothing. If you go from north to south, traditional clothes are far different from the clothes in the Tabriz and Turkey parts of Iran, other part of Iran, to the Kurdish clothes, to the central part of Iran, and to the lowest and western part of Iran. All different ethnicities, different groups have had their, right now it has changed a lot, but they have had their own styles of clothing, again, they have kept their unity. So this is the spirit of Nowruz that has turned diversity into unity, has helped the people to be able to live together and to respect each other, to create a peaceful society. Why it is important for the world? I think what Mr. Guterres, UN Secretary General, mentioned on March 20, 2018 is very interesting. He said that when we see all the conflicts around the world, when we see the rise of xenophobia, racism in so many parts of the world, it is clear that we all need the spirit of Nowruz in order to be able to allow for peace and for justice and understanding. Nowruz unites communities beyond borders. It promotes peace and solidarity. It is also related to the objectives that we are following in terms of contributing to peace. The most important thing, that poem that reflects Iranian, the spirit of Nowruz and Iranian and worldview, is in the Sadi poem, that he says, human beings are members of a whole in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. This shows the essence of the Iranian worldview and how we look at each other and how it helps to promote peace and understanding, especially in times of pandemic that right now we are living in, and it's something that we need to understand. So for these reasons, Iran and the US need to look for a new beginning, a new day, Nowruz. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Mr. Sonboli. If you folks out there in cyberspace, thank you for joining us. We would welcome a Q&A. And you'll see there at the bottom of your screen a Q&A, and I'm going to see what that is. Let me start with a question I would like to begin with. Thank you so much for this concept of Nowruz. We here in the States, I think we need to give a hearty amen to that. This is something we work for and we need to work harder for in the midst of this pandemic. So thank you for a very timely example that Iran is providing. I have a question as we begin to look at questions. We're going to take another maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Everybody's busy, but let's take a few minutes for questions. My first question would be for me, as we find ourselves self-quarantined, and that is so important, what are some movies that we might find on Netflix? I think there are movies out there, and as I prepared for today, I began thinking, you know, this might be the time to try some Iranian movies. I've seen a few in my time, and The White Balloon, is that one that is a classic? Are there any that you would recommend that might be on Netflix or other sources that we might see some Iranian movies during our self-containment?
Actually, I do not watch too much movies, frankly speaking. I'm more interested in reading books, and as a researcher, I'm more interested in readings than books, than movies. However, you can find many interesting movies to watch at this time. I don't know that you can find them in the Netflix, but I'm sure that you can find, if you search any movies in YouTube. And also there is another channel, Iranian channel, that's called, let me remember it. It's there is one Iranian channel that they provide. Anyway.
Press TV would Press TV?
No. It's like it's an Iranian version of YouTube. you can find many movies there, Iranian movies there to watch. I do not have any recommendation because it's up to the people. They have different tastes of movies, so I cannot
Well,
recommend a specific thing.
we'll see. Maybe next week we can think about that.
Yeah, I try to search and find and to
And
recommend.
we're going to be back next week. So tell your friends. Here's a question from Carol. Carol writes, thank you, Mr. Sonboli, for sharing your time and insights on this webinar. The art and architecture you shared are so beautiful. I agree, diversity deserves to be celebrated and not just tolerated, as there is wisdom from everyone in every time to be shared for the wholeness and well-being of all creation. My question from Carol, please suggest one or two important ways we should apply the principles of Nowruz to the fight against the global COVID-19 pandemic and to address the climate crisis.
That's a very good question. Thank you very much for raising that, because first, we need to be patient. This is the first element of the have-seen table that I explained. We need to be patient in the times of the this pandemic. The second element that will help us, we need to be wise and deal with this crisis wisely. We should not rush to reopen or try to do something that will hurt more people, will endanger more lives. If we deal with others in here based of love, and we see that we need a different way. We should not just pay attention to the economic aspect, economic costs of the pandemic. We should also pay attention to the human cost of the conflict, and in the long term, we will benefit economically if we prevent the expansion by dealing wisely. But the most important thing that comes in Sadi poem is that we have human essence. We are all one. We are not different, and this is a threat against all humanity. This is not a threat that again targets one country and not the others. There are right now lots of debate here in the US and in other countries about where it originated. I think this is not the right question to deal with, because it could originate from any country and expand to different parts of the world. And even from this point of view, we cannot say that all originated from China, because it began from China, but it went to other countries from different countries. So it means that dealing with this phenomenon is a global responsibility. And this is a threat for all of us. This is not a threat just for the United States or for Iran, for China, for anybody. But without cooperation, without the spirit of Nowruz that emphasizes on humanity, on cooperation, on love, on respect, on these elements, we just enter into a vicious cycle of xenophobia, the blame game, and things that prevent cooperation. At a time that we need more cooperation, what I see in the media is that all of them or many have launched a blame game against this or that country. This is the not right approach to deal with a global pandemic that targets everybody everywhere. That's why what I think this at personal level, it shows that we should be patient, and at national and international level, it tells us, the spirit of Nowruz tells us that we have to deal with it wisely and from a common humanity point of view, not from a narrow-minded nationalistic point of view.
Exactly. Thank you. Well put. Dr. Maria doesn't have a question, but Dr. Maria says, thanks so much and blessings.
Thank you very much.
Doug writes, please define Nowruz and state when it happens each year. Doug wonders if Nowruz is the Iranian New Year, is it Muslim or any other religion, and when did it start to be celebrated?
Actually, nobody knows. It is, we can say that it is, it begins 2,500 years ago. Where exactly it began, it's not clear, but it began in Iranian Empire at that time. So we cannot say that it belongs to it. It's before Islam, so it's not an Islamic ceremony, but it has continued, and there, because Iran has been occupied by Arabs, by Mughals, and also by others a few times, but it had continued under all different governments in Iran. So this is how it is deeply rooted in Iranian culture, and not Iranian culture, because right now Iran is at the center, but still, as I mentioned at the beginning, it is celebrated from eastern part of China to some places in western part of China, sorry, to eastern part of Europe. So it is it includes much more religious, ethnic, and cultural groups and people right now. So this is it is a human heritage. We should not attach it to a specific country, religion, or group.
We have time for two more questions. We want to wrap this up in about 8 minutes, 10 minutes, so people have other schedules, but it's so helpful and so interesting. Roger writes, I have heard when you blame someone, there is no solution. Would Nowruz agree with that statement? When you blame someone, there is no solution. Is that another way of putting Nowruz?
Yes, that's true, because when you blame others, how do you want to solve the problem? We need to embrace others. We need to love each other. We need to respect each other, to be able to turn our brain, to target our attention to the problem. Right now, some leaders are targeting each other. So that may be good for domestic politics sometimes, but even in this case, I don't think that it is good for domestic politics, because it prevents solving a global problem that targets everyone. So I think that this blame game that I see around the world, it's not useful for anyone.
Our last question comes from Mats. Mats writes, how is the philosophy of Nowruz reflected in Iran's official foreign policy?
It's very interesting. First, we celebrate Nowruz with other countries as a public diplomacy. We celebrate Nowruz, and here in the UN, in Iran, there are countries that respect Nowruz. They gather together and they try to respect each other and to celebrate together. But the philosophy of Nowruz is respecting diversity. If you go back to and watch Iranian system that I mentioned, it is an inclusive system that you have Sunnis, Shias, Christians, all are, for example, in the parliament. They are represented in the parliament. In the system, at least the parliament is inclusive of everybody that are in the society. This is very important, because if we pay attention to the larger area, we are living in, I can say that the most diversified part of the world in West Asia. In Iraq, you have diversity. In Turkey, you have diversity. In Syria, you have diversity. In Afghanistan, in Yemen, in all countries, we have mosaic societies in the Middle East and West Asia. Living in such a situation, contributing to peace and stability in such a situation in a mosaic society is not possible without respecting others, without accepting and respecting diversity. That's why, in terms of foreign policy, if you study Iranian peace plans for Afghanistan, for Yemen, for Iraq, for Lebanon, for Syria. In all cases, you find a single word, inclusive systems, that represent and includes all. We supported Yemeni dialogue. It means inclusive system they create for themselves. In Iraq, we supported such an inclusive system. In Afghanistan, we supported the inclusive system. In Syria, we are supporting an inclusive system, and in Lebanon. So, and in terms of Palestinian issue, we believe in an inclusive system, a system that includes both Muslims, Christian, and Jews, everybody together. The reason is that when you are living in a mosaic society, if you want to support the independence of one group, you have to accept the same right for everybody. It means that the Middle East should go to war forever on borders. That's why there is no other solution than respecting and accepting diversity in foreign policy. And that's the key point in all peace plans. If you go back and study them, you find that this is the respecting and accepting diversity is the key point in all peace plans that Iranian foreign minister have proposed in recent years.
One more comment from Reverend Ron. He sends his greetings. Thank you, Reverend Ron. And let's sneak in one last question from Janet. Janet writes, I'm delighted to be made aware of this longstanding practice. Thank you. Is there a book you would recommend to help us learn about and understand Iranian culture? Do you have a favorite Iranian author, one who is translated and available in English? That's just something we can hold till next week if you want.
Yes, I think I have to do research. Okay. But I think, what I like most, and it's famous in here in the US, is Rumi. Rumi is perfect in presenting Iranian culture, living together, peaceful culture, love, and because he presents a peaceful interpretation of Quran in all his poems and in Islamic studies. So this is Rumi is very important. Sadi is very interesting. Hafiz, the old writers I recommend, because if you study the Iranian famous writers, old writers, not new ones, that have shaped Iranian identity. The reason that I raise this issue is important because if you visit any home and look at their the books that they keep at their home, you find these books. This is what they have. It has shaped their identity. That's why, for example, at times of pandemic, they may read Hafiz, Sadi, Rumi, these important figures. And if you even go to mosques, you see that even clergies turn to Hafiz, Sadi, Rumi to promote their ideas. It means that even these philosophers, writers have influenced the religious figures in presenting their ideas. And what they present is peaceful interpretation, and they encourage peaceful interpretation of Islam, and they encourage the spirit of Nowruz, living to each other peacefully and respecting each other. That's why they have had a very important role, a key role in keeping Iran together, in shaping the Iranian identity as a peaceful society.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sonboli. I'm going to take the liberty of putting in a mention of Common Humanity. Here is our website. I mentioned a pencil earlier, commonhumanity.org, and you can write to us and get on our mailing list for future Peace Channel meetings. The same time, same station, click on the same link. Next week, we're honored to have Mr. Sonboli come back. Again, that's commonhumanity.org. We are also glad to have contributed. Go ahead, Mr. Sonboli, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. If it's possible, let's have it 2 weeks later because of the Ramadan. It's a little bit difficult next week. So I think I recommend if it's possible, let's have it 2 weeks later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be great. So 2 weeks later, we will have another Peace Channel meeting a week from today. And I will get information out about that, but we will have Mr. Sonboli return in 2 weeks, and we're eager to see you. Again, thank you all so much. We're honored by your presence. Stay well, everyone. Social distancing, be well. We'll see you back here next week, and we're looking forward to more from Mr. Sonboli in 2 weeks. Blessings.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants for paying attention to the discussion, and also I want to say Happy Mother's Day. It's tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this is recorded. You'll see this on our webpage. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Sonboli.
Thank you. Bye.